How's it going today? Everyone having a good conference? Anyone come to Columbus for the first time for this conference? Never been here before? What'd you think of it? It's good. It's an exciting city sometimes, except if you don't follow Ohio State football, and then you're kind of confused during the fall when traffic just comes to a complete stop in the entire city on Saturdays. So a little bit about myself. I was in an application support role after college. I became fascinated with how that application worked. I taught myself to code with some online resources, mainly the Odin project. That's an online open source coding platform. Throughout my career, I've worked at Nationwide Insurance as a test automation developer. Worked at JPMorgan Chase as a software engineer and eventually a lead software engineer, and currently work in product management, again at JPMorgan Chase. I should point out that any and all views expressed in this presentation are my own personal views and not necessarily the views of my employer, now that that legalese is out of the way. My career has positioned me really well to understand what users expect in a good experience and how to make those user experiences scalable and maintainable from a technical perspective. And on a more personal note, I'm a cat lover. So, thank you. So on the left-hand side there is George Costanza, and on the right-hand side is Colonel Cat. And cats are my partner and I's hobby, but my cats have hobbies of their own. So George loves to chase butterflies in our yard, and he also loves to sit in the middle of our sink and drink water. In fact, if we don't give him water from the sink every morning, he will get very angry. Colonel likes to find new and innovative ways to make my partner and I, to wake my partner and I up in the morning. These can include, but are not limited to, a paw to the nose, paw to the chin, paw to the forehead, or getting right underneath the middle of the bed frame where no one can reach her and screaming at the top of her lungs. So what's this talk about besides cats? So it's about product management and how your skills as an engineer can make you an amazing product person, and why you should consider product management as the next step in your career. Since all of you have chosen to attend this talk, you're probably at a point in your career where you're considering where you want to take that career long term. Show of hands, how many of you have had friends or colleagues that moved on from doing everyday development to technical architecture or people management? Pretty common career path, right? In fact, most developers I've spoken to think they have only those two choices, continuing to become a more experienced developer and eventually an architect or principal engineer, or management and managing developers and sort of giving up that ability to write code. Product management gives you a mix of both because you own the design of your product and you get to lead a team of developers on implementing that design. But what is product management? So, according to Wikipedia, product management is an organizational function within a company dealing with new product development, business justification, planning, verification, forecasting, pricing, product launch, and marketing of a product or products at all stages of the product lifecycle. That's a lot. What's the TLDR on that? 'Cause that's a lot. It just means that within product-driven companies, the product team identifies business problems and technical solutions to those problems. That's it. For example, Uber saw that traditional ride-hailing methods offered a user experience that left something to be desired. They used technology to solve that user experience problem, and people are willing to pay Uber in order to use that product because it's that much better of a user experience. Now, show of hands, how many of you are familiar with Agile and have maybe heard of the role of an Agile product owner? That's good. That's a good amount. So it's important to call out that Scrum doesn't have an explicit role called product manager, but they do have a role called product owner. These titles are typically used interchangeably, but the roles and responsibilities of each is very different. So let's discuss the two. So a product owner has a few important responsibilities under Scrum. Those include running refinement, the ceremony where the dev team points cards. And this is a critical Agile ceremony. It is the handoff when the dev team reviews the product's asks, points them, and then by the act of pointing those cards, that is the agreement of the contract between development and product that says development is ready to accept the work. If the dev team doesn't have enough information to estimate effort, it's on the product team to get them that missing information, or else work grinds to a halt. So show of hands, has anyone here ever been in a situation where they were working on a card or building something that just had incomplete and missing requirements? Right? It stinks, right? You get blocked and you either can't finish or you build something that you'll likely have to rework later. So let's talk about the other roles of a product owner. So the product owner maintains the roadmap, backlog, and the product vision. That sounds like a lot. So wait, what's a product vision? The product owner decides what purpose the product will serve based on what problems it solves. This becomes the product vision. For example, Uber's product vision is transportation as reliable as running water, everywhere for everyone. The theoretical product manager for Uber would keep that vision in mind when planning new features and choosing the order in which they'll be delivered. This queue of future work is the product roadmap. Features that help further the product vision the most would be built sooner than features that further the vision less. But all features should further the product vision. If a feature doesn't further the product vision, it shouldn't be included in the roadmap and probably shouldn't be built. So let's talk about that roadmap. To put it simply, the roadmap is the plan of what features and functionality are we going to build into our product so that they can best fulfill that product vision. A roadmap is typically filled with a wish list of features. They're not really well defined yet and not ready to be taken into the sprint or worked on by an engineer. These items typically get refined over the course of several months by the product manager and the stakeholders requesting the work. So let's talk about the backlog. The backlog is just a queue of work that needs to be built. Items in the backlog exist in two states, refined and unrefined. Refined items are ready to be worked and have been accepted and estimated by the delivery team. They can be taken into a sprint at any time. Unrefined items are waiting to be reviewed and estimated by the team and can't be taken into a sprint until that happens. So that's what a product owner does under Scrum, but what's a product manager? So according to Wikipedia, they perform market and competition analysis, initiate product and product-specific service improvements, requirement profiles, specifications, for new products and product-specific services, participate in the creation of in the creation of specifications, create and implement the market launch concepts. The product manager is responsible both for the development of the product strategy and for the planning, implementation, and coordination of the measures derived from it and for the permanent and final control. They are responsible for managing products across departments. So that's a terrible and confusing explanation. What's the TLDR on that? So the product manager is ultimately responsible for ensuring that their product solves customer problems, or maybe even just a single problem. They're essentially the CEO of their product. Remember what a product owner does? Well, a product manager is responsible for filling the agile role of product owner, but also has a broader range of responsibilities. The responsibilities of a product owner are a subset of responsibilities of the product manager. And it's important to call out that while a product manager is ultimately responsible for fulfilling the role of product owner for their respective teams, they don't have to fill this role themselves. Some product managers choose to delegate that role so they can focus on big picture items and longer term strategy. This organizational structure of multiple product owners reporting to a product manager is typically common in larger companies where a product manager manages multiple products and dev teams for those products. So what does it mean to be the CEO of a product? So first and foremost, you own the budget. You set the objectives and key results, commonly called OKRs, and you're the public face of your product. So what's an OKR, for those that haven't heard of it in the room? Well, they're how you measure success. So for example, a few quantitative OKRs for Uber could be grow the user base this year by 10% worldwide, and retain at least 90% of the existing user base throughout the year, while maintaining a 4.5 or greater rating on the Google Play Store and Apple Store. What does it mean to be the public face of your product? So you're the expert of your product. The business can come to you for any and all questions if necessary. not only can stakeholders come to you with questions about your product, they should come to you. You own all communications about your product, even if you don't manage those communications personally. For example, lots of products employ someone to send out customer communications and write customer-facing documentation. It's typically not all done by the product manager alone, but it could be on small products. This does not mean you just answer customer questions all day. It just means you're the person ultimately responsible for getting customers correct answers. It also means that you're responsible for representing your product to the world. This can mean doing public interviews or conference talks to discuss your product when it launches, or to discuss new features of your product when they launch. For example, Google product managers often publish blog posts or make announcements on tech news sites to discuss new features for their products. And sometimes these announcements are delegated to a community manager. But what's a product-driven company? So a product-driven company is one where success of the business is explicitly linked to the success of the product. Typical business functions like finance, HR, and recruiting all exist to forward that product vision. Remember the OKRs we just talked about? Those company-wide OKRs are typically set by leadership, and the product teams typically translate them into product-specific OKRs. For example, a food delivery app may set up an OKR across the company that says something along the lines of, "We want to increase revenue by 10%. The product team that manages the food delivery application would then decide how they could enhance the product to meet that OKR and define OKRs as a result. If the product team knows that adding certain features will attract additional users, it would set an OKR to roll out those features well before end of year. This OKR would then influence the priority of items in the product team's backlog, and other lower priority items would get pushed out. Well, if that's a product-driven company, what's everything else? So some common alternatives to a product-driven company that I'm going to talk about are sales-driven and market-driven. So sales-driven companies that deal in software products typically let their sales drive feature development and bug fixes. For example, a company has created a popular content management system for small bed and breakfast rentals in Canada. The vision of the product was simply to be the best CMS for rustic Canadian getaways. The sales department needs to bring in sales revenue, and so they want to expand to larger hotel chains in Mexico. They speak to several large Mexican hotel chains who will only use the software if the company makes many functionality changes to support large hotels. The app development team then gets pressured to build those changes, even though they are completely unaligned with the product vision. So a market-driven company. So market-driven companies build features or enhancements based on market trends in order to sell the software to a target market. For example, a company that produces a popular ride-hailing product sees that a competitor is adding a different line of service, allowing users to tell their driver the temperature preferences before they're picked up. The company is worried about losing market share to their competitor, so they rush to implement this new feature, not knowing if any of their current or existing stakeholders even want it or even will use it. It's important to call out that these choices are not mutually exclusive. Most companies are a mix of all three. For example, a product-driven company could certainly evaluate the new features being released into competitors' products. And if those features are in line with that product vision and meet a customer need, they'd probably implement similar functionality. But which companies are product-driven? A lot of them. Let's talk about everyone's favorite example. So normally when you hear about product-driven companies on the internet, or if you Google it, the top result is going to be Apple. So notable products include the iPhone, Apple Card, Apple Pay, MacBook, Mac OS, to name a few. And it's important to call out that not all of those are physical products. The iPhone's a physical product. The Apple Card's a physical product. Apple Pay's not. It's a service. Maybe a capability. They still have product owners too. So for Google, they have some notable products such as Search, Maps, and you could say the entire Android operating system. Uber, notable product is the Uber app. It's also important to say that not all companies have multiple products. A lot of startups only have one. It's also important to say that even if a company looks like it has a single product from an end user perspective, there may be multiple products working behind the scenes to create that main product and a seamless user experience across those products. You may ask yourself, what do I bring to the table as an engineer? So as an engineer, you understand technological hurdles. You've probably seen software rollouts that have failed. You can identify technology solutions that can solve multiple problems at once. You understand pressures that engineers are under, and you know what they need to succeed. So how many of you have seen projects or initiatives fail in your workplace due to a lack of technical understanding? Show of hands. I'm glad people raised their hands. I was terrified no one was going to raise their hands for that one. So, as a product manager, you're a core part of deciding what gets built and can help prevent these failures. And what good is the ability to identify technology solutions that solve multiple problems at once? So for example, programmatic users of your application need to know when a certain batch job has been completed each day. Your application also needs to know every time someone updates a record in another upstream application. As engineers, we can see that both of these issues can be solved by a messaging bus that both your downstream users and upstream users can take advantage of. What does it mean to know what engineers need to succeed? You know the level of technical detail an engineer should need to build a specific feature. You can bring items to the engineering team confidently during refinement, and the dev team will be able to estimate them confidently and correctly. This will allow your team to deliver work at a very predictable pace, which will help you properly predict when items in your roadmap can be delivered for your stakeholders. This keeps your engineering team happy, because they have the requirements they need, and it keeps your customers happy, because they get all the functionality they need. So how has my specific engineering background helped me in product management? So as an ETL developer for Nationwide Insurance, I learned a lot about cross-application ETL flows. And I learned a lot about how failures in those flows can affect data quality and cause outages. Since most applications rely on some kind of ETL functionality, whether it's database-driven or API-driven, the ability to understand how data flows across an ecosystem has been incredibly helpful in debugging production issues. And as a full-stack developer, I've worked with a lot of client-side frameworks like React and Ember. These frameworks make complex client-side validations easy and scalable. And knowing how client-side validations can be used to create a better user experience for customers has helped my team build forms that can make our user experience enjoyable and frustration-free. As a developer, I built many features that span multiple applications. Knowing these integration points allows me to direct the efforts of my QA persons efficiently when implementing large ecosystem-wide features. So what are those typical career paths for an engineer? So there's really three things I want to talk about. There's being a people manager, there's being a senior or lead engineer, or there's architecture. So let's talk about people management. So some engineers eventually reach a point where they don't want to write code full-time. These people often move into engineering managerial roles, managing other engineers. I've managed engineers before, and I can say it was very rewarding. Successfully managing a team and helping them solve problems while growing their career is a great feeling. But what's rewarding about being a people manager? Well, seeing the team grow, seeing the team accomplish challenging tasks, and seeing the team improve over time. And as a product manager, you'll still get to help the team achieve all of the above. So let's talk about being a lead engineer. So as a lead engineer, you're expected to drive development from the engineering side when it comes to new features. You'll most likely be responsible for mentoring junior developers and ensuring the team has a well-rounded technical skill set. You may also be responsible for implementing more complex and potentially more impactful features. But what's rewarding about being a lead engineer? You get to solve complex problems, you get to mentor and grow your team. As a product manager, you'll solve complex problems for your customers as the core part of your job. You're ultimately responsible in making sure the solution meets the customer's need, even though the delivery team is designing that technical solution. It's also really worth pointing out that as a product manager, you'll not get any opportunities to code hands-on. But if you wanted to keep hands-on coding for the rest of your careers, you probably wouldn't have chosen to attend this talk. So, How about architecture? Not all companies have a dedicated architecture role. A lot of smaller companies simply have their lead engineers act as architects in a limited capacity. But of those companies that do have a dedicated architectural role, you'll find that role doesn't typically get to write any hands-on code and doesn't typically involve leading a team. But what's rewarding about being an architect? You get to solve complex problems by influencing others. As a product manager, you own your app. Just because the dev team is writing the code does not mean that you don't own that code. You own every piece of the code that composes your application, and you're responsible for ensuring that it functions in a way that meets the needs of your users. You as a product manager have the right to challenge any technical design proposed by your engineering team. And having a technical background will allow you to truly understand those designs. Why you should consider product management as a career path. So you get to see the larger picture and have a hand in shaping it. And you get to create. It's a really creative process. Creativity is a central part of product management, since product is responsible for designing new products and enhancements. Coding is a really creative process, and product management takes the process a step further by allowing you to design entire experiences from start to finish. You don't get to engage in this creative process for just your application, though. You get to see the overall design and development process happen across your whole organization and truly get a sense of how your product impacts your customers' lives. And with that, I'll open up the floor to questions. I see we got a lot of time left. Please feel free to ask about anything.
So can you tell us about like kind of what your journey was to be from a software engineer to product manager, kind of, you know, things that you did along the way to kind of get you to that level, and kind of how you got into that role?
Sure. So as a lead engineer, we were not in a product environment. So we didn't have a product manager. We hadn't gone through a product transformation. So we were just an engineering team working in a roughly agile, really waterfall-ish style. And we needed the lead engineers to essentially step up and manage the teams. That's when I became a people manager and also essentially started talking to customers to refine those original requirements and take ownership of everything the team built. So we fractured into what we called work streams. So each team, there were two, owned specific chunks of the app, specific features that we would all build, and we'd split new features up as we wanted. But I became responsible for all those different work streams and for designing it from start to finish, from the user experience to the technical implementation, from writing the original requirements, from signing off with the customers, from defining the definition of done. That really triggered me to think, I like this. This would be a great career path. What's this called? It turns out it's product management.
So did that involve like any additional training for you? Did you, because then at that point you're taking on a little bit of the I guess, did you run Agile before that, or?
I did.
Okay, so once you became the product manager and you start taking kind of control of these different teams, was there did you have to implement anything new from an Agile standpoint in order to, or kind of just how did you get nominated for the position, how did that all transpire?
Oh, so that happened essentially through attrition. So we lost some senior engineers, and we needed people to fill in. So general evolution of a team, I suppose.
Okay.
But
so no additional training needed outside of that for you to become kind of step into that role, or? If
you've never been in an Agile role, which I had been in before, so I didn't need any Agile training, but I'd highly recommend some if you've never been in that role. I've led a couple teams through Agile transformations, and I can say that it's tough if they've never done it before, but once they really get in the groove, they've all really enjoyed it, if done properly.
When you've been in the lead role, have you actually created acceptance criteria for the project?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And I've done that for for individual stories on the small individual feature level, and as a product owner and manager, I've done that for entire new applications.
I was working a project and we discussed what we wanted, and the product owner would start saying what he wanted. An hour later, he was still talking what he wanted, but he never gave us acceptance criteria. So we created what we thought he wanted, and he didn't like it, and then our manager yelled at us and came in the meetings that we needed to create what the product owner wanted, and we brought up the point, he never gave us an acceptance criteria, and then she hit us back again. Well, you know, he is not the problem. You guys are the problem. Well, he never told us what solution he wanted, so it's kind of hard to create a solution if you're going to get told what the solution is.
And that's the goal of the Agile ceremony known as refinement. So every time I take cards to my team, or have had cards taken to me as an engineer, the acceptance criteria is key. So that's where the delivery team looks at the card, reviews that acceptance criteria, and says either, this is completely bogus, we can't build this, like this doesn't make any sense, or yeah, we can build that if you give us more details, or yeah, that's fine.
Kind of based off the last couple of questions ago, your journey to becoming a product manager from an engineer, I think the skill sets are drastically different from engineer to product manager. And I wanted you to comment a little bit on like soft skills and skills that you think are unique to enable a product manager to be successful, which are drastically different than, say, a lead engineer.
Absolutely. So I'll say that the key, I don't know if it's technically a soft skill, it's probably a technical skill, but the key soft skill is communication. So, and that's when I hire engineers, I look for that in engineers as well. Not just technical ability, but the ability to share their technical knowledge with their technical peers is key. As a product owner with a technical background, if you have the ability to explain technical solutions and technical problems to your non-technical peers, that's amazing. Like that is very, very, very helpful. That's what I would call that the most beneficial skill you get coming from a technical background into a traditionally non-technical role as a product owner. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I had a couple others too. As your role of product manager, do you find yourself, little follow-up to the last question. Sure. As a product manager, do you find yourself in a lot more meetings than you were as an engineer? And do you find yourself kind of herding and babysitting a lot more?
So overall, yes. But I'll pick that apart a little bit. So as a lead engineer, I spent maybe 50% of my day in meetings. And my lead engineers now, not due to me, spend just about as much time, if not more, in meetings. So they as lead engineers mostly spend their time writing or mentoring others to write good code and not necessarily writing it themselves. So I'd say it's kind of a wash meeting-wise, but yes.
Okay. And last one. Our company does the Agile methodology. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on an OKR that you're currently working on and your progress towards achieving that OKR.
I don't know what I'm allowed to say.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I can. I don't think I can. I don't think I'm allowed. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thanks for attending the talk. I appreciate it. If you think of any other questions, here's my contact info. Feel free to hit me up after this.
Thank you very much, everybody. Just wanted to give a last announcement. If you had ordered a T-shirt with your registration, that also goes for speakers who are entitled to a T-shirt. Please pick it up at the registration desk. Any that are left over at 3 p.m. we're going to put on sale. So if you didn't order a T-shirt, that's your opportunity to get one. We also have the raffle open. Please go ahead and you'll find QR codes scattered around to get the URL to that. So we'd appreciate all that support. Thank you very much.